Hello and welcome back to Bioclass Bites. In this video, we are going to talk about the circulatory system. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like and share this video. Although viewed as a whole, the human body is actually made up of 10 different systems. Each of these systems plays a vital part in the health and well-being of the entire body. Again, in this video, we will be focusing on the circulatory system. So here are the components of the circulatory system. It is made up of the heart, the different blood cells, the different blood vessels, and the fluids that run through it. The functions of the circulatory system includes circulating oxygen and removing carbon dioxide from the cells, provides cells with nutrients, removes the waste products of metabolism and bring it to their excretory organs for disposal, protects the body against disease and infection, and clotting of the blood prevents bleeding after injury. Let's talk about the heart. The heart is a hollow muscular organ found between the lungs. It's really a muscle. It's located little to the left of the middle of your chest, and it is about the size of your closed fist. So right now, close your fist, looked at it, and that's approximately the size of your heart. The heart does not really have anything to do with our emotions. It's really a muscle responsible for pumping the blood towards the rest of the body. All our emotions and affections, all the love and crushes and infatuation that we feel are all found in our brain or caused by the chemical reactions in our brain. So your heart is a pump or two pumps in one. The right pump is made up of your right atrium and right ventricle, and their job is to bring deoxygenated blood towards the heart, towards the lungs, for gas exchange. While the left pump is made up of your left atrium and left ventricle, and their job is to pump oxygenated blood towards the rest of the body in order for the cells to use the oxygen and nutrients. So let's look into the external anatomy of the heart. So you have here your superior and inferior vena cava. So both of these are major veins of the body and they carry deoxygenated blood. Superior vena cava carries deoxygenated blood coming from the head towards the heart, while inferior vena cava carries deoxygenated blood coming from the lower parts of the body to the heart. Your aorta is another major artery. It carries oxygenated blood towards the rest of your body. Here, you can see here, ascending aorta. It carries oxygenated blood towards the head and arms. Aside from that, you also have your left, left and right pulmonary arteries. They carry deoxygenated blood towards the lungs. Then you also have left and right pulmonary veins. They carry oxygenated blood coming from the heart towards the lungs. So by the way, the orientation of the heart, so the left and the right side are based on the person's body or person's orientation. So if you look at the heart, your left hand, that's the left side. Then your right hand, that's the right side of your heart. Okay, so that's the guide there. Then you also have the following veins on your heart. So you have your corona artery, left corona artery. Okay, so it nourishes the heart with oxygenated blood. Okay, so you have your right corona artery. So still artery, it nourishes the heart with oxygenated blood. What else? Then you also have here a descending aorta. So it carries oxygenated blood towards the rest of your body. So you have ascending aorta towards the head and the arms, descending aorta, lower parts of the body. Then aside from that, what else? So you have your right atrium, your left atrium, your right ventricle, and then your left ventricle. Okay? You might have heard of some people getting coronary bypass surgery. So that's actually done when there's blockage in a person's coronary arteries. So for example, there's a blockage here, okay? So blood is not passing through, so there's a blockage there, a narrowing of that coronary artery. So that could result into the death of some of the muscle tissues here. So what the doctors would do is to create an alternative pathway for blood to reach that part of the body. So, for example, if there's a blockage here, they could have another artery that will connect at this point, past the blockage. Or if there's a blockage here, they could have another artery that will connect at this point. Okay, so that's the bypass surgery. They bypass the blockage. They do not let the heart or the blood pass through the blockage anymore. So they would create a bypass artery here so that this part of the heart will not die. So yeah. Let's now look at the internal anatomy of the heart. So if you dissect the heart, these are the parts that you will see. So you still remember the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. So they will let the blood flow into the right atrium. Okay? And then separating the right atrium and the right ventricle is your tricuspid valve. It's called tricuspid, because it has three attachments, okay? Three tendons attaching to the heart walls. Okay? So 1, 2, 3. Then separating the right ventricle um, and the left ventricle is your interventricular septum. Okay? Interventricular septum. So it separates the right ventricle from the left ventricle. So blood passing through the right superior and inferior vena cava will empty into the right atrium. Then passing through the tricuspid valve, the blood will go into the right ventricle. Then it's separated from the left ventricle by your interventricular septum. Interventricle septum. Then the right ventricle will pump the blood passing through the pulmonary valve. Okay, so we will talk more about valves later on. So this is your pulmonary valve, and then the oxygenated blood will now go through your left and right pulmonary artery. So this is your pulmonary artery going to the left, pulmonary artery going to the right. Then there will be a gas exchange happening at the capillaries of the alveoli of the lungs. Then oxygenated blood will return to the heart, passing through the left pulmonary veins and right pulmonary veins. They will empty into the left atrium. So the left atrium will now flow the blood into the left ventricle. So they are separated by the mitral or bicuspid valve. Bicuspid because it has two tendons attaching to the heart muscles. Mitral because it looks like the head of a bishop's hat, something like that. So oxygenated blood is now found in your left ventricle. Then your left ventricle will pump the blood towards the rest of the body by passing through the aortic valve here. And then it will go now into your aorta. Then you have your ascending aorta and then descending aorta. Other parts of the internal anatomy includes your epicardium. That's the outermost layer or outermost covering of the heart. Myocardium, the actual heart muscle, okay, in the middle. Then endocardium, that's the part of the heart inside, okay? Inside, cardium, heart. Cardium, cardiac, heart. So inside the heart, that's the actual heart muscle walls. Okay? So chordae, tendinae, trabeculae, carneae. So those are the names of those tendons of the tricuspid valves. Okay? So these are the internal parts of your heart. So let's look at the valves of the heart. It has four major valves. The tricuspid valve, which separates the right atrium from the right ventricle. So it's found here. your bicuspid valve, which separates the left atrium from the left ventricle. It's found here. Your pulmonary semilunar valve. Okay, this is where the blood will pass through as it goes into the lungs. And the aortic semilunar valve. So this is where the blood will pass through before it goes to the rest of the body. So what's the purpose of valves? Valves are important because they prevent the backflow of blood. You see, blood can only go through one way. It cannot, once it passed through a certain part of the circulatory system, it's not supposed to go back. Okay? And to prevent that backflow, valves are in place. So let's look at this animation again. Right? So look at the action of the tricuspid valve between the right atrium and right ventricle. So as you can see, whenever the right ventricle pumps, the tricuspid valve closes. That way, when the right ventricle pumps, the blood has nowhere to go but to the pulmonary artery. Okay? So see here, the right atrium pumps the blood. It goes into the right ventricle. When the right ventricle contracts, the tricuspid valve closes so that the blood will only go through the pulmonary artery. Same with the pulmonary semilunar valve. When the right ventricle pumps and it passes through the semilunar valve, it closes after the blood has gone through. So it also prevents the backflow of the blood. See? So right atrium contracts, tricuspid valve opens, right ventricle contracts, tricuspid valve closes, and then blood will now pass through the pulmonary artery. Okay, passing through the pulmonary semilunar valve. Same with the bicuspid valve. So as the blood empties into the left atrium, it opens to let the blood pass and go to the left ventricle. But as soon as the left ventricle contracts, the bicuspid valve closes so that the blood will only have one way to go, and that is through the aortic semilunar valve. Okay, it will not go back here to the left atrium. So it will only flow one way. Then the semilunar valve also closes so that the blood going to the aorta will not go back to the left ventricle. So that's the purpose of your valves, heart valves. They make sure that the blood will only go one way. Now, for some people, problems with their valves could actually cause certain diseases in the body. My brother, for example, he had tetralogy of Fallot. It's actually a very rare disease wherein there's four different, that's why it's tetralogy, tetra, four. There are four different things that are wrong with his heart. So one of the problems was his interventricular septum was open. There's a hole between the interventricular septum. So it means that the oxygenated blood is mixing with the oxygenated blood is mixing with oxygenated blood. So that's one problem. That's one source of complications with his heart. Another thing, one of his valves had a problem. So it means that it's not closing properly. So whenever I cannot remember which of his valves had a problem, but the problem happened when since the valves are not closing well, there's a backflow. So for example, if this does not close well, whenever the right ventricle pumps, some blood will still rush back into the right ventricle. So that's how important valves are. They prevent the backflow of the blood. It means that they will only go to their destination in one way, and the interventricular septum separates the right pump from the left pump, preventing the mixing of deoxygenated and oxygenated blood. To learn more about anatomy of the heart, I recommend that you watch this video from Nucleus Medical Media. I'll provide the link in the description below, as well as this video from TED Ed entitled How the Heart Actually Pumps Blood. Again, linked in the description below. So the circulatory system is named as such because its main task is to circulate blood throughout the body. So we define circulation of the blood as the process to move blood to a site or sites where it can be oxygenated or when oxygen can be replenished in the cells, blood cells, and where waste can be disposed. So the main goal of circulation is to get oxygen and to get rid of body waste. To accomplish that, there are two types of circulation, pulmonary and systemic circulation. So pulmonary circulation, it will give you a clue. Pulmonary, pulmon, it is connected to the lungs. It carries oxygen depleted or blood with very low oxygen or oxygen poor blood away from the heart towards the lungs and returns oxygenated blood back to the heart. So the pulmonary circulation only involves the heart and the lungs. Systemic circulation system, entire organ system. It carries oxygenated blood away from the heart towards the body to deliver that oxygen to the cells and returns deoxygenated blood back to the heart. So systemic circulation system, it involves the heart, the lungs, and the cells of the body. Okay, to help you visualize more the blood flow, I recommend that you watch this video. I will provide the link in the description below. First, let's look into pulmonary circulation. Okay, before anything else, there are some clarifications I need to make. Most of the books and most of the illustrations that you will see has this color coding. They use the color blue to refer to the deoxygenated blood or oxygen poor blood. Okay, those are the blood cells that came from the cells in your body, and they just deposited the oxygen to those cells. So they have very low oxygen levels. While the color red is assigned to oxygenated blood. These are the blood cells that just came from the lungs. So they just replenish their supply of oxygen. So they have very high levels of oxygen. However, just to clarify, in real world, you do not have blue blood. You do not have that color. You only have one color of your blood, and that's red. However, some sources have said that the oxygenated blood have darker red color, almost maroon in color, compared to a bright red oxygenated blood. Okay? They just changed the color. They just assigned the color blue to the oxygenated blood so that as the students study the blood flow, they will not be confused. Okay? Again, just to clarify, you do not have blue blood. You only have red blood. One could be deoxygenated blood or oxygen poor blood. The other one, a little bit brighter in color but still red, oxygenated blood or oxygen-rich blood. Just a bit of trivia, there are some animals who actually have blue blood. The horseshoe crab and octopuses have blue blood, okay? It's because instead of iron that's being attached to their red blood cells, they actually have copper. So that gives their blood blue coloration. But for the rest of the animals, for humans, we have red blood. So the blood that you draw from your veins, it's color red, okay? There are just some exceptions in the animal world. Again, octopus and horseshoe crab. Let us now trace the pathway of blood in pulmonary circulation. So again, this only involves the heart and the lungs. So the goal here is to bring the blood to the lungs where gas exchange could take place. So let's start off with the oxygenated blood coming from the upper part of your body flowing through the superior vena cava. The oxygenated blood coming from the lower parts of your body will go via the inferior vena cava. They will go into the right atrium. Then the blood will flow to the right ventricle passing through the tricuspid valve. The right ventricle will pump the blood towards the pulmonary arteries passing through the pulmonary valve here. and then it will go to the left and right pulmonary arteries. So the blood will now go to the lungs where gas exchange will take place. So blood will leave behind carbon dioxide molecules and pick up oxygen, and this will take place in the capillaries of the alveoli of the lungs. So blood is now oxygenated and it will go back to the heart, passing through the left and right pulmonary veins. The blood will go to the left atrium and passing through the bicuspid valve, it will empty into the left ventricle. The left ventricle will pump the blood towards the aorta by passing through the aortic valve. Then from the aorta, oxygenated blood will go to the descending aorta and ascending aorta and descending aorta towards the rest of the body. So let's discuss again pulmonary circulation, this time including an animation. So the oxygenated blood coming from the upper and lower part of your body will pass through the superior and inferior vena cava into your right atrium. Okay? So the oxygenated blood will descend into the right ventricle, passing through the tricuspid valve. The right ventricle will pump the blood towards the pulmonary trunk and passing through the pulmonary valve, and they will go to the left and right pulmonary arteries. So in the lungs, gas exchange will take place wherein the blood will deliver oxygen and will deliver carbon dioxide and pick up oxygen in the capillaries of the alveoli of the lungs. So this time, blood will now become oxygenated blood. So they will return to the heart, passing through the left and right pulmonary veins to reach the left atrium. So the blood will empty now into the left ventricle, passing through the bicuspid valve. The left ventricle will now pump blood towards the aorta, passing through the aortic valve. So from the aorta, oxygenated blood will be delivered to the rest of the body through the ascending and descending aorta. The second type of circulation is called systemic circulation. So the goal here is to bring oxygenated blood towards the rest of the body to be used by cells and to return deoxygenated blood back to the heart and lungs for gas exchange. So how does it happen? It's actually a bigger picture of the pulmonary circulation. So you start off with the oxygenated blood coming from the lower parts of your body, passing through the inferior vena cava, and the oxygenated blood coming from the upper part of your body, your head, passing through the superior vena cava. So the oxygenated blood will go to the right atrium and passing through the tricuspid valve will go to the right ventricle. The right ventricle will pump the blood towards the pulmonary trunk, passing through the left and right pulmonary arteries towards the lungs where gas exchange will take place. So again, gas exchange take place in the capillaries of the alveoli of the lungs. So here, blood will leave behind carbon dioxide molecules and pick up oxygen, okay, turning them into oxygenated blood. So now they are bright red. They are now carrying oxygen in the red blood cells. So oxygenated blood will now go through the left and right pulmonary veins and will go to the left atrium, then passing through the bicuspid valve into the left ventricle. So the left ventricle will now pump the blood towards the aorta, passing through the aortic valve here, then ascending aorta will bring the blood to the upper parts of your body, then the descending aorta towards the lower parts of your body. Once the oxygenated blood reaches your cells, here another gas exchange will take place, okay? So here the blood will leave behind the very important, very precious oxygen molecules and take with them the waste product carbon dioxide, okay? So they will leave behind oxygen and take up carbon dioxide, leave behind oxygen and take up carbon dioxide, now turning them into deoxygenated blood. And now they are ready to return back to the heart for another circulation. Okay, let us try systemic circulation again, but this time with animation. So we start off with the oxygenated blood coming from the upper and lower part of your body, going to the superior and inferior vena cava to the right atrium. Okay, so here, there, right atrium. Then we all know what happens in the right pump of the body. So the oxygenated blood will now go to the right ventricle, passing through the tricuspid valve. So the right ventricle will pump the blood towards the lungs, passing through the left and right pulmonary arteries. So in the lungs, an important process called gas exchange will take place, wherein the blood will leave behind carbon dioxide molecules to pick up oxygen. This will happen in the capillaries of the alveoli of the lungs. So having been refreshed with oxygen, the blood is now considered oxygenated, and it will return to the heart, passing through the left and right pulmonary veins. So we all know what will happen now at the left pump of the heart. So blood will now go to the left atrium and will go to left ventricle, passing through the bicuspid valve. So the left ventricle will pump the blood towards the aorta, passing through the aortic valve, towards the ascending and descending aorta, towards the cells of your body. So in your cells, another gas exchange will take place. This time, the blood will leave behind the precious oxygen molecules and pick up the waste of metabolism, carbon dioxide. So this time, the blood will now become deoxygenated because they have left oxygen and have pick up carbon dioxide. So now the oxygenated blood will return to the heart, passing through the superior and inferior vena cava again, and then the cycle continues. So this animation shows us what happens to the oxygen and carbon dioxide levels of the red blood cells as it undergoes systemic and pulmonary circulation. So now the blood is oxygenated because it has gone through the lungs, and it will return to the heart to be pumped towards the rest of the body, where it will leave behind oxygen and pick up carbon dioxide. So it's now deoxygenated. So the blood will return to the heart, go to the lungs, undergo gas exchange, leave behind carbon dioxide, and pick up oxygen. Okay, so they are now oxygenated, then they will return to the part of that body, deposit oxygen, pick up carbon dioxide, then return to the heart. Okay, so this is how systemic circulation takes place in the body. Okay. Now we go to the other component of the circulatory system. So we've done the heart. Now let's go to the blood. Okay, specifically the blood cells. So a blood cell is a cell of any type that's normally found in the blood. So we have three types: red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets. Okay, so red blood cells are also called erythrocytes. Okay, white blood cells are also called leukocytes, and platelets are also called thrombocytes. Okay, so together, these three types of cells make up a total of 45% of the blood tissue. So this image shows us the components of the blood. So if you get a freshly drawn blood and put it in a test tube, it will look like this. So everything is mixed up in here. However, if you subject the blood if you put it in a centrifuge, and it's actually a machine that spins the test tube to separate the components. So if you actually use a centrifuge on this blood sample, and then after several minutes, this is how it will look like. The heaviest and solid particles, so those are the blood cells, will be found at the bottom, and that's mostly your red blood cells. Then you have a very few white blood cells and platelets, so that's this part. And then the actual liquid part of the blood, where all of these cells float, okay, float around, is called plasma. So what makes your blood red are actually the numerous red blood cells floating in it. Okay, so The cells are just 45% of your total blood. The remaining 55% is plasma, the fluid portion of your blood. So this diagram shows us again the composition of mammalian blood when centrifuge, okay? Because the centrifuge, that's a machine that rotates the blood sample, and it allows the separation of the composition into three layers: the plasma, okay, the plasma here, leukocytes, and the erythrocytes, okay? So 45, 55% again of your blood is made up of plasma. So it is made, so this is that part again. So it's made up of water, ions, okay? So these are your blood electrolytes, sodium, potassium, calcium. It also has plasma proteins, your albumin, immunoglobulin for defense, fibrinogen for clotting, okay? And other substances transported by blood. So those are your nutrients in the form of glucose and fatty acids, waste products of metabolism, respiratory gases, such as oxygen and carbon dioxide, and even hormones. All of these are found in the 55% plasma of your blood. The remaining 45% again are the cellular elements. So these are the cells that are floating around in your plasma. So you have your leukocytes, okay? So these are your white blood cells, okay? Such as your basophils, eosinophils, monocytes, okay? Wherein their main function is to defend your body against foreign invaders, okay? To boost your immunity. You also have platelets, that's for blood clotting. Well, the remaining percentage of your blood is made up of red blood cells, your erythrocytes, okay? Wherein their major task is to transport oxygen to your cells and remove carbon dioxide as products of cellular respiration. So now let's look at the different blood cells that we have. So the first one are your red blood cells. They are the most common type of blood cell and the principal means of delivering oxygen to the body. The red blood cells have a special structure that allows them to attach oxygen to their body and to easily detach it for easy pickup and delivery of that molecule in the body. So this allows them to deliver and pick up and deliver oxygen to be brought to the rest of the body. So they take up oxygen in the lungs for most of the animals, for most mammals, and some reptiles, and gills for fish and amphibians. So in humans, the red blood cells are described as biconcave. It means that on both sides, they have this depression or they have this hollow part of their body because they are considered enucleated. It means that they lack nucleus. They lack nucleus and some organelles. It's because red blood cells are produced in the bone marrow, so they do not have a nucleus because they do not need that for cell division because they are produced by mass. So the next type of blood cells are your white blood cells. They are in charge of the immune system. So their task is to defend the body against infectious diseases and foreign materials. So in this image, we see here the white blood cells together with the red blood cells. So at this point, the white blood cells are considered amorphic. It means that they can change their shape based on the situation or status of the body. So they are also produced in the bone marrow, and the number of white blood cells in your body is often an indicator of disease. That's why whenever you're sick and you go to the hospital, the doctor would require that you get a blood test so that they would be able to count the number of white blood cells. So if you have higher than normal number of white blood cells, it means that you have an infection. So the doctor could give you an antibiotic or antibacterial to fight off that infection. So white blood cells are the soldiers of your body that fight off infection. Some of them die along the way, so they become the pus in your wound. So whenever you see a pus or whenever you have a wound and you see a pus around it, those are the dead white blood cells. They died fighting for you. The last type of blood cells are your platelets. These are tiny blood cells and their task is to stop the bleeding of your body. So you see here on a scanning electron micrograph of a red blood cell surrounded by many platelets. So for example, if you ever get a wound or your blood vessels get damaged, the platelets will rush to the site of damage and form a plug in the form of a clot to fix the damage. So again, the principal function of platelets is to prevent bleeding. To learn more about how the body heals itself, I recommend that you watch this video from TED-Ed entitled How a Wound Heals Itself. I will provide the link in the description below. So now let's go to the next component of the circulatory system, the blood vessels. So blood vessels are responsible to transport blood throughout the body. So blood is the cargo. The vessels are the modes of their transportation. So we have the following types of blood vessels. Arteries, they are usually colored red in diagrams because, you guess it right, they carry oxygenated blood. Veins, on the other hand, are usually colored blue because they carry deoxygenated blood. So arteries carry blood away from the heart. Veins carry blood towards the heart. Now the region we're in, or the type of blood vessel we're in, the gas exchange could take place from oxygenated to deoxygenated. We call those capillaries. So these blood vessels, artery, capillaries, and veins, transport blood cells, nutrients, and oxygen to the tissues of the body. They also take away waste product, such as excess water and carbon dioxide as metabolic waste, and they bring it to the excretory organs to be excreted. So let's talk about our arteries. So arteries again are responsible for bringing oxygenated blood away from the heart. So the main artery of the body is the dorsal aorta. Okay, wherein it divides out into smaller branches called arteries, so that every region of your body will have its own arteries that supplies with fresh oxygen-rich or oxygenated blood. So arteries are often colored red from the aorta, then it branches off into smaller arteries. So, so here you can see the dorsal aorta. It's found along your back, and then it divides into two arteries to deliver oxygen to your kidneys. So arteries are tough on the outside and smooth on the inside. So the muscular wall of the artery helps the heart pump blood towards the rest of the body. So again, arteries deliver oxygen-rich blood to the cells, and the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide occurs in the capillaries of the cells. So veins are responsible for carrying oxygen-poor blood or deoxygenated blood. That's why they are mostly colored blue in illustrations and in animations. So they receive blood from the capillaries in exchange from oxygen, and they get carbon dioxide instead. So one feature of veins is that they have valves. Similar to the valves of the heart, the vein valves are necessary to keep the blood flowing towards in one direction. So they prevent the backflow of blood, and this allows the blood to fight off the force of gravity. So so let me skip. If you notice here, the arteries will carry the blood away from the heart. So usually they do not need to fight off gravity because the direction is going this way downwards. However, veins have to carry blood towards the heart. So most of the time they have to fight off the force of gravity. Okay? So that they could perform their function. That's the reason why on major parts of your body, some crucial parts of your body, you have vein valves. So they're found here, at the back of your knee, on your armpit, on the insides of your elbow, on your wrist. So you have their valves, and they prevent backflow. So that once the blood has passed through, and then the blood has passed through, then the valve here closes, the blood cannot go back anymore. Veins are often closer to the skin and they contain valves to help keep the blood flowing in one direction towards the heart. So skeletal muscles, of course, as you can see here, also help in contraction, and they squeeze and constrict the veins. Okay, so the flaps of tissues, okay, that are ensuring that blood will only flow in one direction are called valves. Okay, and they close once the blood has passed through. Um, so the valves will open to allow the blood to pass through, and once the blood has passed through, it will close. So the rest of the system will ensure that the direction of the blood flow will be towards the heart. Okay. So the vein color is determined in large part by the color of the venous blood, which is usually dark red. We do not have blue blood. They are usually just colored blue in animations and in books and in illustrations to differentiate them from arteries. Okay, so the reason why vein blood has dark red coloration is because they have lower oxygen content compared to arterial blood. Arteries generally carry oxygenated blood, while veins carry deoxygenated blood. However, there are some exceptions to that rule. So first, your pulmonary arteries. So pulmonary arteries, ayan. Okay, pulmonary arteries are the only arteries in the body that carry deoxygenated blood. So if you still remember pulmonary circulation, pulmonary arteries carry blood from the right ventricle. Okay, pulmonary arteries, left and right arteries. While pulmonary veins are the only blood vessels that carry oxygenated blood towards the lungs. Okay, so they are the only veins that carry oxygenated blood, so they are considered exceptions. They are named as such because by the nature of the direction of the blood. So pulmonary arteries, even if they are carrying the oxygenated blood, they are called arteries because they are carrying blood away from the heart, just like regular arteries. While pulmonary veins are considered veins or called veins because they carry the blood towards the heart. Okay? So towards the left atrium, just like the superior and inferior vena cava. So the reason why they are called as such is because of the direction of the blood that they are carrying. So towards the heart, veins, away from the heart, arteries. So they are the only exceptions. So these are the major veins and arteries of the body. If you notice, if you have um, one artery, it also has a counterpart vein. So axillary artery, it has a counterpart axillary vein. So if you have an abdominal artery, you also have an abdominal vein. A femoral artery, you also have a femoral vein. Okay, so these are the major veins and arteries of your body. So the last type of blood vessels are called capillaries. So unlike the arteries and veins, they are very thin and very fragile. They are so thin that the red blood cells can only pass through in one file. Okay, so they have to line up and squeeze through it. They're only one epithelial cell thick, so they're very thin. So the blood cells can pass through them in a single file. So what's important about capillaries is that they are the site of gas exchange. So this is where gas exchange take place, either in the capillaries of the lungs or capillaries of the cells. So as you see here, these are deoxygenated red blood cells, but through gas exchange, they become oxygenated as they pass through the capillaries. So I recommend that you watch this video, Gaseous Exchange, to learn more about the role of capillaries in gas exchange. I will provide the link in the description below. I also recommend that you watch this video from TED-Ed, Oxygen's Surprising Complex Journey Through Your Body. Very informative. I will provide the link in the description below. The last component of the circulatory system are the fluids. Okay, so the first fluid is your actual blood. So this is a specialized body fluid that delivers necessary substances to the blood cells, to the body cells, especially nutrients and oxygen, and they are also in charge in getting rid of the waste products away from the same cells. So the waste products are the products of metabolic processes. So blood is circulated throughout the body through the blood vessels and the pumping action of the heart. So I hope you recognize this. This is an actual image of a freshly drawn blood. So as you can see here, it's red in color. But once you subject it into a centrifuge or you spin it around many times, then the blood cells, the solid blood cells will settle at the bottom. So these are your red blood cells. Then somewhere here are your white blood cells, while the rest are the liquid plasma. So this is plasma is the liquid portion of your blood. This is where these red blood cells swim through. Red blood cells are the reason why your blood is red, okay? Because of the numerous red blood cells. The next is lymph. The next fluid is lymph. It has the same composition as a blood plasma. However, they mostly contain white blood cells. So lymph are produced in the lymph nodes and they are carried by lymphatic vessels, a different kind of vessels, which carry the lymph fluid, the nutrients to the bloodstream. Okay? So lymph picks up bacteria and brings them to the lymph nodes to be destroyed. So those are the sites. Well, also it's good to know that metastatic cancer can also be transported by a lymph. So they are in charge in destroying bacteria or infectious particles in your body. So to learn how the immune system works, I recommend to watch this video from TED-Ed. I will provide the link in the description below. Also this one from Corgizast, Immune System Explained. 1. Bacteria infection. Again, the link in the description below. This one, how blood pressure works from TED-Ed. Very important, very relevant to our video. Again, I'll provide the link in the description below. What happens during a heart attack, still from TED-Ed. Linked in the description below. And to wrap up everything that we have discussed about circulatory system, kindly watch this video. Linked in the description below. Now let's try answering this simple pop quiz on the different parts of the heart. So number 1, this is your pulmonary artery or the start of your pulmonary artery. But specifically, if you're referring to the valve, this is the pulmonary valve or pulmonary semilunar valve. 2, the right atrium. Okay, but this part is the tricuspid valve. Then right ventricle. Then this is your aorta. This is your left atrium and you have your bicuspid valve here. 6 is your left ventricle and then you have your aortic semilunar valve here. Now let's try this task. Okay, so label the following parts of the human heart and encircle all the four valves. So the two pumps first. So you have your right pump and your left pump. The 4 chambers are your right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, and left ventricle. The pulmonary arteries are there, shown here, coming from the right ventricle. The aorta is shown here, coming from the left ventricle. The superior and inferior vena cava, okay, going into the right atrium. And then these are the valves. You have your tricuspid valve, bicuspid valve, pulmonary valve, and aortic valve. So starting the blood coming from the head and lower part of the body, where will they go? To the right atrium, down to right ventricle, then the left and right pulmonary arteries, to the lungs, where gas exchange will take place. Then it will return to the heart, passing through the right pulmonary and left pulmonary veins, to left atrium, down to left ventricle, then out into the aorta, back to the head and lower parts of the body. To help you learn more about diseases of the human body, particularly diseases of the circulatory system, I recommend that you read this lecture PDFs from the online library. I will provide the link in the description below. That ends our video. I hope you learned something new. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like and share this video. Till next time, goodbye.